Morning, everyone. Welcome to the Safety Committee. Today is Wednesday, July 8th, 2020. I'm Councilman Matt Zone, Chairman of the Safety Committee for Cleveland City Council. I'd like to call this meeting to order. Madam Clerk, will you please call a roll? Before you call the roll, I'd ask all my colleagues to turn on your video feed. Call the roll, please.
Zone,
Present.
Forensic, Bishop, Bashir Jones,
Here.
Joe Jones,
Here.
Present.
Santana. Mr. Chairman, you have a quorum.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. For the record, please note Councilwoman Santana as an excused absence. She had a death in the family and she's will not be available today. So this Safety Committee hearing is being held during the COVID-19 emergency declaration in accordance with Ohio's open meeting laws as amended by sub HB 197. This meeting is being held using the Zoom platform as being live streamed on YouTube and on Cleveland's Channel 20. It can also be seen on Cleveland City Council's website and from Council's Facebook page. In accordance with Ohio's open meeting regulations as amended by sub HB 197, notice of this committee hearing was publicly posted. This committee hearing will be conducted as all committee hearings in accordance with Council's rules and Robert's Rules of Orders. The chair will facilitate the meeting and call on persons to speak. If you wish to speak, please use the raise your hand option on Zoom. We're all getting very familiar with that. Please limit your comments to matters before today's committees. As is usual practice, any actions to be voted on during the committee will be done by a voice vote, called and recorded by the committee clerk. So our first order of business today, we have a legislative item that we're going to deal with first. And then after we will receive a presentation from the Cleveland Peacemaker Alliance. We're joined by Grady Stevens, the Director of the Community Relations, Ms. Crow, who's the Interim Director of Cleveland Peacemakers Alliance, as well as their board chair. Kevin, I apologize, I forgot your last name already, but we'll get to you in a minute. But now we are going to open it up with Ordinance 523-2020 by Council Members McCormick, Brancatelli, Zone, and B. Jones to amend sections 131.06, duties of special events manager of the codified ordinances of Cleveland, Ohio, 1976, as amended by ordinance 1516-11, passed December 5th, 2011, 131.07, special events permits as amended by ordinance 164-18, passed March 5th, 2018, and 131.30, the duties of Commission of Recreation, as amended by ordinance 1330-A-10, passed December 6, 2010, to eliminate the administrative requirement to hire police officers for block parties and small neighborhood-based community events. To my colleagues, this is a councilmatic legislative item. As in past practices, it has an automatic mandatory referral to a number of directors. We have not currently received the legislation back. It requires the sign off of the Director of Law, the Director of Finance, the Director of Planning Commission, the Director of Safety, and the Director of Public Works. Currently, this has been received a mandatory referral to the Planning Commission. Their next meeting is on July 17th. So technically we can't vote on the ordinance today, but for purposes of expediency, for purposes of transparency, for purposes of council doing our due diligence, we are going to have a conversation around this piece today so I can gauge the level of support from our colleagues And then ultimately, I'll make a recommendation to the council president for next steps. So with that, I know Councilman McCormick, who's one of the lead sponsors with Councilman Brancatelli, got married. And so he's couldn't join us. So we're all happy for him. But I would like to, before I ask Councilman Brancatelli as one of the lead sponsors to make some opening remarks, I want to remind my colleagues and the administration, the city council held a hearing, the safety committee, in June of 2018 on this specific issue. We took resident testimony, and the new policy in play has really created a financial hardship. And at that hearing, it was conveyed after the hearing that the administration was going to take our concerns under advisement and would move to craft a new policy. Well, it's now 2 years later. Times are changing, and we're getting a very adverse reaction to the policy that's in play. I do want to mention to my colleagues that there was an online petition that was started in response to this that garnered over 1,200 signatures of support. I have just a few of them with me, and I do want to read just a comment or two, just to set the context of what the community is concerned about. Block clubs are important to unite a community, to solve local problems, and to create a place for open discussions on important topics at hand. These groups are not able to afford to pay security, and on many of the meetings I've attended and block club parties I've attended, not once was safety ever an issue, even with hot button topics. So many comments similar to that. And so with that, I'd like to recognize Council Member Tony Brancatelli.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and certainly thank you on your leadership on this issue. As you stated, we have had hearings on this before, and you've led the issue of the resident concerns. And I think just as you mentioned just a few years ago, considering where we're at today, the idea of having a small block party where you just close off a portion of the street, get your neighbors together, requiring them to have an armed police officer with a bulletproof vest and all the gear, just certainly what we're trying to convey is these block parties and small community events aren't gatherings of thousands of people. They're just in fact that, a small block party or a community event. Some of the issues I outlined in our communications about Cleveland Public Theater doing their STEPS program, where we block off 200 feet to let these young kids go out there and perform, or if we're doing just a little block party where we're getting people together to play games. Certainly under pandemic times, it's have canceled all those events, but in preparation for when we do open back up again and start to build community, having a sense of just having a safety plan and your ability to close off a street in a more logical and communal way, I think is what we're trying to convey here. And again, certainly supporting the Cleveland Police and having to have a safety plan is important. But until we get those rules changes, this is our opportunity to have an ordinance in place that doesn't put a burden on our community and our residents who are trying to put these events together. And it's going to be that much more important when we open back up again and start trying to get people together and trying to really bring our citizens together is one of the reasons why we're introducing this today. Unmute yourself, please.
Thank you, Councilman Brancatelli. Before I open it up to questions from our colleagues, I'm going to ask our staff attorney, Jennifer Heinert O'Leary, who worked very diligently on this, to walk us through the actual ordinance and the changes that would be a part of that. Ms. O'Leary.
Thank you. Through the chair. So as was already stated, this ordinance changes 3 different codified ordinance sections in order to get rid of the administrative requirement to hire police officers for block parties and small neighborhood-based community events. And currently, block party applicants have to hire 2 police officers in order to get their permit granted by the Division of Recreation. Also, there are the small neighborhood-based community events that go through the special events committee, through the manager of special events, and they are also required to provide a combination of law enforcement and security professionals as required by the manager of special events. So we did some research. Others, local and Ohio cities such as Cleveland Heights, Lakewood, Cincinnati, Columbus, Dayton, and Toledo do not require permit applicants to hire police officers for neighborhood block party type events. And these requirements in our city are really administrative requirements. They are not specifically written in the code. They are on the permit application, but these codified ordinance sections give the director and the managers the broad authority to require security and require the applicants to hire that security. And that's why we've carved out exceptions in this ordinance, in the codified ordinance sections for these type of events, not to require police officers. So the ordinance just basically goes through those three different sections. One deals with the duties of the manager of special events and marketing, and says that, you know, they can require event promoters to provide different things, except that they can't require hiring of police officers or private security for any block party or special event, neighborhood community-based special event that has anticipated attendees of up to 100 persons at one time, and that does not hire vendors or sell food. And that similar language is in the section that governs special events, rules and regulations, and that governs the Division of Recreation's application.
Thank you, Counselor. I do want to also acknowledge for my colleagues' benefit that you did meet with Isha Han, who's our special events manager. So you understand fully the process. You've worked with the administration and shared our concerns. So I appreciate your due diligence on this process as well. Just some comments from myself, and then I'm going to open up the questions I have. Vice Chair Polensek and then Joe Jones, Councilman Joe Jones. We absolutely need to have safe community events. And I think there should be clear and predictable guidelines on how we close down an event, secure an area, and make it safe for people. But the hardship of having an application that you must have 2 off-duty police officers with their names and badge number on the permit in advance of approval. No police officer, whether they work for the city of Cleveland or suburban agencies or the county sheriff, is going to work for less than $25 an hour. That's about the going rate. And no one will work for a minimum of less than 4 hours. And we're requiring 2 officers. So that's automatically $200. On top of the, I believe it's a $20 permit fee. These are small-based community events. It creates not only a financial hardship, but as noted in Councilman Brancatelli's opening remarks, you know, right now at this time, people in the community are calling for us to find ways that we can create better communities, stronger communities, and not do it in a way that people feel like they're being watched by police. And quite frankly, it's unfair to our police to put them in difficult situations like this. So I understand the issue on both sides. I look forward to a conversation around this matter. And right now, I'd like to recognize Councilman Mike Polensek.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm just trying to get some clarification here. So if you have an event under the proposed legislation amendments, if you have over 100 people, would you have to supply security or not? Well,
I will defer that to Ms. O'Leary, but again, today is again really beginning the conversation with our colleagues. And I know I'm putting the administration, particularly Director Johnson, in an awkward position to respond to questions that for something that is legislatively being driven by the council. Okay. So I just want to put that out there first, Councilman, and make that acknowledgement to Director Johnson but I would ask for responses from the administration to react to the councils that are being posed. So Councilman, restate your question and I'm gonna call on the administration.
So under proposed legislation, if you're gonna have over 100 people, would you need at that point then to have security?
I'm gonna go to Ms. O'Leary first and then the administration.
Yes, through the chair to the council person. That applies to the small neighborhood-based community events. And yes, you would still need security if the event had over 100 people.
Okay,
Yeah,
So-
it just applies to events that have an anticipated amount of under 100 at one time
yeah,
and don't sell food or host vendors.
okay.
But that's different than block parties.
So we all want to be supportive of what we traditionally call the black parties, where a bunch of folks get together on the street, as we've seen so often. And obviously, we all know those have dropped off substantially over the years because of the security requirement. I just want to be, put at ease. I guess that's the best word to use, phrase that when we have these events, that there is a sense of security and peace. So not that we have problems that do ultimately draw the police in, that do put them at risk, that do put residents at risk. So I want to make sure there's a balance here, a good balance. We want to encourage neighborhood participation. We want to encourage people to get together on blocks and streets as they once did in the city. We used to have one on my own street, a black party. And it was very successful. You know, everyone would cook and bring something out and you'd set up tables, and, you know, somebody would up the street would be playing a guitar, another person would be playing an accordion somewhere. It was a real interesting mix of music and culture and people. And a lot of that has fallen by the wayside. I just want to be assured that we're not going to just go to the opposite direction, where we create the potential for problems on our blocks and in our streets. Because we all know things have changed substantially in the city of Cleveland. And I don't have to tell anyone what we've experienced these last several months with increased levels of violence, felonious assaults, et cetera. So I want to side on caution. I just want to make sure that we're not going to open Pandora's box and then have something come down the pike. So if you're saying over 100 people, they're still going to have to provide security. I'm fine with that. I can live with that. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councilman Polensek. I do want to remind our colleagues that every street closure permit for a block club, a special event, requires a councilmatic sign off.
That's right.
So nobody knows these neighborhoods and communities and streets and block clubs better than the local council person. And if you feel for whatever reason that a potential event could potentially escalate to a larger number than 100 or has the potential to not be a safe environment, you always have the right to deny that request as well. Another safeguard that's in place. Councilman Joe Jones.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think that this is, finally we get to a point where we can deal with this issue. As you stated earlier, we talked about this 2 years ago. And I think my colleague Michael Polensek, sentiment about the whole thing is the way I feel about the particular circumstance too. And I do want to err on the side of caution. Unfortunately, in my community now, it's changing, and we see a lot of gang kind of activities that we've never seen before, graffiti being written on the sidewalks. So I'm also, likewise, I'm concerned about the increase in the uptick of continued violence in the city of Cleveland and its negative impact on our citizens. And so when you say, that we will have the sign off of the events and there will be other methods of security, what methods would that be? How do we credit that and as a real security versus not having a police officer?
Maybe at this point, and you still have the floor, Councilman, I maybe want to allow Director Johnson to talk about the permitting process. it's my understanding you have to submit an application, I think 30 days in advance of your actual event. So if Ms. Johnson, if you could kind of walk through the application and permitting process, or anyone else from the administration on this point, and then we'll go back to Councilman Joe Jones. Commissioner, Director, I can't hear you. Director Johnson, we can't hear you. The computer is not working. It probably doesn't have a speaker. So we'll hold there. Councilman Joe Jones, don't lose that train of thought, and please, you have the floor. Any other questions you have?
Mr. Chairman, that, is my sentiment there. I just think that, your leadership on this issue is superb. I had no idea that we had 1,200 petitioners that signed off and concerning this. I know that we had quite a bit of discussion 2 years ago about it. And I'm pleased to know that there's some options there for the citizens. But at the same time, I am concerned about events that don't have security. And I'm further concerned, Mr. Chairman, too, as we're talking about the subject matter of allowing people to come in our neighborhood and our parks. And I think that as council members, we should have some authority to sign off over there as well. I have people coming to Carews Park and other parks. They're tearing up the place. They're destroying the parks. They're shooting and they're popping off guns. I mean, it's absolutely insane. And there's no way we should be leasing or renting out the parks. I don't know how we're set up to do that. And then there's no recourse to the damage that's being done to our property here in the city of Cleveland. So I think that we should even look at how we should have a say-so on who comes in our neighborhoods and our communities and their activities and their negative activities. We should have some say to that. So, Mr. Chairman, I think that, I'm opening up a door where I don't know what the historical perspective is on this issue, but I'm not a happy camper coming to my park and hearing really salacious, nasty, demeaning music that's destructive. And we have a family environment in our neighborhood. And to have young people listening to that kind of music, are you kidding me? And it blasting loud, glaring up and down the streets, no recourse for it. And you don't want to, because you don't know what you're walking into sometimes. You go up and tell folks to turn their music down. They may, who knows, they may be armed and it could turn into a really bad situation. So, Mr. Chairman, I'm really concerned about the people who are coming in our parks, how they're utilizing the parks, how they're destroying the parks. And I got some photos I can show to you on devastation and destruction of our parks. People have gotten so wild that they are bringing their cars and doing donuts in our area and just, recklessly behaving, and it's horrible. And not only do I have photos of it, but I also have videos of the activities. And so I just wanted to bring that to your attention. And when I did call initially, when one police officer came out to the scene, and I called my commander Kutz, and he made sure that several more officers came out to the scene to prevent what was happening in terms of the destruction of our sod. And so I just wanted to put that on your radar screen. Then lastly, if the director can answer that question, I have no unreadiness about this. I do want us to take a look at, if all possible, having a say so, just like we do with approving people to have street parties and block parties. We should also have approval sign off on people coming to our parks and our recreational facilities. Can we entertain that, Mr. Chairman, as an option as well, somewhere down the line as relates to safety?
Yeah, I mean, there are two separate issues here, Councilman.
That's correct.
You've identified the issue about, I get the impression you're supportive of this initiative.
Yes.
As it relates to small scale block parties that are on streets. And I want everyone to be clear and understand the intent of this legislation is to address exactly that. These large scale events are something different, and we will talk about that at another time. But I do want to read the application, which I have right here. The instruction says, you got to submit the completed application, including the councilperson's signature, to the Division of Recreation with a $20 money order, no checks, cash, or credit cards payable to the city of Cleveland. The application must be received 14 days prior to an event, and the event may take up to 10 business days to process. If approved, the permit will be faxed or can be picked up at the above address. If not approved, you will be informed in 10 days. The reason I said 30 days in advance, because when they submit this application, they must already have the signature and sign off of the local council person. They must have the name and badge numbers of 2 police officers, and then they have to enter in the ability to hire them. So the issues you identified, Councilman, I think we could take up the ladder at another point. You have the floor.
Mr. Chairman, I turn the floor back to you. Thank you. I have no other comments.
Thank you. Other questions or comments, Councilman Bashir Jones?
Thank you so much, Chair. This is definitely something that that I support. I think that this is a really good thing, and you've mentioned for 2 reasons. One, financially, this can become a burden, and also, especially the time period that we're in, we want to mend the divide between the perception of police and the community. And people begin to feel a certain type of way when they feel like they're being policed, and especially during those good times. But at the same time, as Councilman Forensic said, we do want to be proactive in our safety. I just want to make it clear to everybody tuned in. A lot of people have been hearing me speak on this matter of policing. I in no way am saying that we need to get rid of police. We need to get rid of a system that allows racism to thrive within it. That's what we need to get rid of. But there are tons of officers, Commander Todd in my area, Commander Morris, and a ton of police officers who truly care about their work, truly care about the people that they're working with and working for, and truly care about this community. And those are the officers that we need to replicate. You all saw the story of the officer who
went on the roof to get the young child out of this out of harm's way, right? Like, these are the things, Chairman, that we need to continue to promote. I just want to say to Councilman Joe Jones' point is that I have those same issues in my area, and I think every urban area in the country have those same. I think every area, period, where you have young people who blast music. I'm sure when Chairman Zone was in his breakdancing days, he blasted music. That's not as I'm getting Chairman, I realize I'm getting older because I'm like, man, turn that down. I don't like loud music as much as I used to. But what I have in my neighborhood is I have a relationship with the young people. So if I see them doing donuts, I remember one young man was on his scooter and he was on his scooter and he was doing burnouts in the lawn. So I went up to him. I said, "Come here, let me talk to you, man." And as I began to talk with him and get to know him, he's a senior at Alabama State University, an honors student. He's got a full scholarship to this HBCU, right? So it's easy for us to look at them from afar and create this perception and then thinking that the key is to over police them. That's not the key. The key is to establish relationships with them to the point that you're able to go to them and say, hey, turn it down a little bit, man. That's a little bit too, oh, my fault, man. My bad, man. We just having a good time. Okay, no worries. We have to establish better relationships, and that takes us going out of our way to establish these relationships with these young people because they want to get to know us. They want to be respectful, but they're just having a good time. They're just being young. And I can guarantee you can go to some parts of the neighborhood and people are blasting Marvin Gaye. They're blasting The Temptations. They're blasting these other music, and it doesn't bother us as much as some young people who are blasting their music. So I just want to say, Chair, for me, it's all about not over policing, and giving our community and the police an opportunity to bridge the divide that has come about as a result of because of the time that we're in. So I support this, Chair. And I understand what Councilman Polenzek is saying. We want to be proactive and we want security to be there. So it's truly a very fragile situation, and we have to take each time. So Chairman, thank you for your leadership on this.
Thank you, Councilmember Jones. I appreciate your comments. You're right on point. Other comments or questions from our colleagues, and then I want to get some reaction from the administration. Okay, hopefully we've worked out these technical difficulties with Director Johnson. Director Johnson, any thoughts or reactions?
Good morning. Can you hear me now?
You sound beautiful.
Wonderful, wonderful. Good morning, Councilman Zone and other members of council. I had a conversation with Director Cox concerning this legislation, and he advised that this ordinance does not impact the Department of Public Works' ability to issue a permit. It's his desire to defer to the Department of Public Safety concerning the elimination of the requirement to hire police for block parties and small neighborhood-based community events.
Fair enough. Appreciate that, Director. I know we have Deputy Chief O'Neill on the phone. I don't know who else is in there. I'm having a hard time seeing who's in that room because of the glare of the light. I see there's a couple people way at the end of this table. Oh, there's a hand waving. Somebody care to respond from the Division of Police? We're waiting for a minute, connecting to audio. So let me summarize what I heard as we're waiting for the police to come on. And what I hear is that there is support for us moving forward with this legislative item. It's going to require, as a part of the plan, and I know this was...
Hello? Can you hear us?
Oh,
can you hear us?
Yes. Please, just any reaction to what you have heard so far, Division of Police.
Hi, Councilman. This is Deputy Chief Drummond. Also in the room with me is also Deputy Chief O'Neill. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can, Deputy Chief Drummond.
Okay, good morning. I appreciate this robust conversation regarding this legislation or proposed legislation. We in the Division of Police, obviously, we feel it important that officers are at some events, especially when we're talking about events that have quite a few people, regardless if it's a block party or not. I think it's critical that when these events occur, that it's reviewed by the Division of Police for various reasons to make sure that obviously traffic cannot intrude on the party goers. As you know, in recent years, vehicles are used to obviously inflict damage and death on folks. So that's one of our concerns and so forth. Not necessarily, it may be nefarious, the person that may be driving the car, maybe someone that's confused, not quite sure where they're going. If we don't have the right type of barrier set up and so forth, that gives us concerns. Also, as a district commander many years ago in District 5, well, District 6 initially, and then District 5, we had several block parties and so forth that ultimately got out of control, to be honest with you, Councilman, where shots were fired and a couple individuals were actually hurt. And no one was killed, thank God, but a couple of individuals were shot and so forth. And that was a block party that started off small and grew and grew and grew, and ultimately had a couple hundred people. And then again, things got out of control. Fights started, and a couple of individuals were shot. So that's not to say that it can't happen with law enforcement there, because it can depend on the sides. But I think it's important that we have a robust conversation about if we're talking about removing law enforcement from these events, that we have a robust conversation, including us, to see what that looks like. And I'm glad to see in the proposed ordinance that there's a requirement there if it's over 100 people that law enforcement is engaged, or security. That I'm glad to see, but I think we need to have more conversation involving the Division of Police relative to making sure that we have sufficient amount of security measures put in place to prevent certain things from happening, such as vehicle intrusion and other things that may happen when you don't have law enforcement around.
Thank you, Deputy Chief Drummond. I appreciate your comments about, I think it was 8 years ago, there was an event, actually a large scale event, where they closed down Clifton Boulevard in my ward called Dancing in the Streets, and somebody drove through a barricade and an individual was killed. So you've illustrated the concerns about this. What we're attempting to do is affect, in a positive way, small scale gatherings. And these are mainly block club events. And I would propose or ask the administration to consider on this application, as opposed to saying the applicant must hire special police departments will not assign officers, and you supply 2 names. I think there should be a sign off from the local district commander to now address the concerns you raise. If you get the local district commander, you're having an event in the 4th district or the 1st district. You have the local district commander's sign off. He's aware of it. He's reviewed your safety plan. At many community events prior to this taking place, people used to just park their cars and block off the street. So there was a physical barrier. And so we need to think about what are those safety elements that are incorporated into a plan. And I would propose, as opposed again to having 2 officers sign off on this or have their name, badge numbers and names, that we would have the local district commander sign off just like the council person. This way it would give some assurity that we can still put forth a safe event and make sure that at least the local district commander is aware, so they can be prepared around traffic issues, traffic flow, and those other matters. In a perfect world, we would have 100 community police officers, and we would just have an officer who's on duty assigned to one of these events. This financial hardship is what really is difficult. And so those are just my reactions, Deputy Chief, to your comments. And I don't know if you have any response to that, you or anyone in the administration.
Again, I appreciate everything that you're saying, and we want to make sure that the community have these events and so forth, and that it's not cost prohibitive. We certainly understand that. For me, and I'm sure you as well, and all the other council members and so forth, safety is just a priority for us. I want to make sure that folks have a good time and is safe. But again, we don't want to come across, and I certainly hope we're not, that we want these things to stop if we don't have law enforcement there. That's not the case whatsoever. We just want to make sure that we're involved in the process, that we have the opportunity, to your point, to review the plans, to make sure that they're sufficient enough to make sure folks are safe as best as we can, prevent certain things from happening. So again, I just want to make sure that we're part of that whole plan. It's nice to have 2 officers there, no question about it. And again, for me, it's very important, and I think the ordinance, and I didn't get a chance to read it, I'm sorry, at least the ordinance is addressing at least over 100 participants in that. It becomes very important that we have at least security involved in that. And again, I need to review it a little bit further and so forth, and I'm glad we're part of this conversation to make sure that these events are safe and that these events happen.
So to the Deputy Chief and to my colleagues, we still have a little bit more work to do. The purpose of why I wanted to have this hearing or this briefing on it, as I said at the onset of this committee, we don't have the ability to pass it out of today's committee. But but I'm hearing overwhelming support for us moving in this direction. I'm hearing from the administration, particularly the Division of Public Works, which signs off, the application goes through their department, but they're deferring to CPD, Ms. O'Leary, and then the sponsors of this ordinance. We will be following up with police to the Division of Police to make sure that we can incorporate any concern process. Again, let's not lose sight of the primary goal. This is to address small scale, single block community events. This is not the big mega events. This is not an event at a public park. This is an event that's happening on a street so we can build community, sit on our front porches, break bread with our brothers and sisters who live on our street, and strengthen community. So that's what really this is about. I believe substituting on the permit, the sign off, and have the local district commander in addition to the councilman prior to submittal. And then that there is some language, and I want to ask Councilman Brancatelli to speak on this point around making sure that there's a safety plan incorporated. Councilman Brancatelli.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and certainly appreciate Chief Drummond talking about having that robust conversation. We did start that a year ago and want to continue to do that, but we also want to be able to move forward with working with our smaller block clubs. And we already have the 100 people as is already in the current separation between large events and small events. So it's not a change of that. It's just acknowledgement of going after the smaller events and venues. And so I think, having a safety plan and being able to put the appropriate barricades or whatever you use as barricades. And as you pointed out, Mr. Chairman, some people just, even when we have patrol cars, the barricade is whoever, even in a private car that they show up in, they use that as blocking off the street. So, and I think as Chief Drummond pointed out that, even when we do have security there, it doesn't prevent something horrible from happening. It's just a matter of being able to control at that time. So I think having that safety plan is important. We already have that in the application of what you're doing. So being able to reinforce that is critically important. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councilman Brancatelli. Councilman Michael Polensek.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and listening to the conversation, listening to Wayne Drummond, who I had the pleasure to work with when he was commander of the 6th District. I would hope that the sponsors between now and before it comes back to us for an official vote could sit down. I've always maintained in City Council, reasonable people could come up with reasonable solutions. And I think, Mr. Chairman, your suggestion of having the commander sign off is a good one, because obviously the commander knows the neighborhoods as well as anyone. In fact, sometimes as well as the council people, because due to the issues and concerns that they're dealing with. We just want to make sure collectively, all of us, council, CPD, that we're going to address any potential issues, and the applicant understands their responsibility as well. It's just not to come in and get a permit and have a party and then it's chaos or there's issues. Because I'm also concerned about cleanup, about, the fit and finish once the event's over on the street as well. We've had issues where residents have been very proactive and have cleaned up, and people have brought out, when we used to do it on my own street, everyone would bring out a garbage can and put it out in front of their house. But then in other areas, that's not the case. And then the council people start getting calls about conditions of litter and problem on the street as well. So I would hope between now and it comes back to this, that the sponsors could sit down with CPD and discuss any of the fine points. So when we bring this, when it comes before us, that we're all on board together. That's all I'm asking. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councilman. Your suggestion about a maintenance plan in addition to a safety plan, I think is a good one and something that can be incorporated into the application.
Councilman, if I can?
Yes, please, Deputy Chief.
This is Chief Drummond again. Currently, on the current form, the district commanders, they do sign off on it. There are several signatures that are required on the current form. One of those are the Commissioner of Rec, Commissioner of Traffic, and Director of Public Service, and also the district commander. So there's a sign off for the district commander now. I think what's important is that we have a plan and a security plan in place that's reviewed by obviously the district commander, as well as my special events coordinator, which is Captain Mike Butler, and so forth, to make sure that the security plan that's being offered or proposed is robust and sufficient enough to make sure that that block party is safe as much as we can make it safe. So that, I think, is a critical component of it, whether it's a small event, which we're talking about here with block parties and so forth. Depends on the block. You know, you can have several side streets that come into a block and so forth, and where cars can come in and, again, intrusion, not necessarily that it's nefarious, but again, we have to make sure that we have a sufficient and robust enough plan to make sure everyone is safe. So those are the things I'm talking about, to make sure that the plan is sufficient, again, as best as we can control it, to make sure people are safe.
I absolutely agree. To my colleague, Councilman Plensick, you have my commitment that we will work with the Division of Police and the administration to incorporate some of these suggestions that we've heard today prior to this actual ordinance being set before the full council before we move forward. Any other questions or comments from my colleagues? Well, hearing none, I appreciate all of you entertaining at least this conversation today. It was, I think, good and healthy, and I think demonstrates also to the community that we're reacting and responding to their concerns. Over 1,200 people signed this petition, many thoughtful comments in there about the hardship that this is creating. And I just want to convey to those individuals and advocates, people like Angelo Trevisano, Emily Matillo, Julian Kahn, people who are behind this initiative to try to get a change. I appreciate you and thank you for your advocacy. And so with that, we're going to conclude this portion of the hearing and move to a special presentation around the work of the Cleveland Peacemakers Alliance. I'd like to introduce and recognize our Director of Community Relations, Brady Stevenson, who will introduce the Cleveland Peacemakers Alliance team. Director. Unmute yourself, Director. Director, unmute.
So I start off by saying, Councilman Zone, Chairman, I've got a very bad connection down here for some reason today, but I'm going to try and get through this as best I can. I want to thank you again for having us before you to introduce Cleveland Peacemakers Alliance and their acting director, Maisha Crow. Just want to go over some things that I know Council asked us for the last time we were together, and I want to make sure that we are clear on some of those things. Just talk about the relationship between CRB and Cleveland Peacemakers Alliance. We have a very strong relationship. As you know, it's been a relationship that we've had for several years with Cleveland Peacemakers Alliance. They have gone through some revamping of Cleveland Peacemakers Alliance on the behalf of CRB, the request of CRB for them to take a look at what we were doing to make sure that our work was really being effective out in the community. So we're using best practices that we've learned from around the country and also from our own work in the past to make sure that we're getting the biggest bang for our buck out of the relationship with CRB and CPA. The relationship, as I said, is a very strong relationship. I appreciate the work that CPA has put in thus far, and the reworking of their organization has really been a blessing to our department. I want to say that all of our work that we do with Cleveland Peacemakers Alliance is connected with the Mayor's Initiative in our resource and recreation centers. So all of the work that we do in concert with those who are working inside of our neighborhood resource and recreation centers. Everything that we do is pointed to the resources that we have been afforded at the neighborhood resource centers. And I think that because we have CPA on board, it's only going to enhance the work that we're able to do. So I just want to highlight some of their things that they work on. Community engagement is a big part of what they do, Chairman, and also retaliation prevention, service linkage, and they're going to give you more detail about these initiatives that I talk about. Wraparound services and case management, community safe passage, and also just work in the community with the residents in local communities that they work with has been very helpful to what we're trying to accomplish with keeping the violence down in the city of Cleveland from the Department of Community Relations. So with that being said, I'm going to introduce Maisha Crow, who is the acting director for Cleveland Peacemakers Alliance, a very bright young lady who I am so happy to be working with at this time. So at this point, I'm going to introduce Maisha to you.
Great, thank you, Director. Good morning, Ms. Crow. How are you?
Good morning, you all. Thank you for the opportunity to sit in on this meeting today. And I'm doing well.
Any opening comments you want to have, and then introduce your board chair?
So I'll just thank you, Director Stevenson, as well for that, the introduction, letting them know how strong our relationship is and our collaborations to end violence in our communities. I would like to introduce Kevin Griffin, Board Chair of Cleveland Peacemakers Alliance, who is here with me today as we present to you guys what Cleveland Peacemakers alongside Community Relations Board are doing in our community.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for allowing us to be here today.
Hold on a second. What I'm going to do, Mr. Griffin, I'm going to mute all, and then I will unmute just you, and that might do away with the feedback. Could those who are not speaking now mute yourself? Mr. Griffin, you have the floor.
Thank you. Is that
much
better? Okay, good.
Oh, you know what? I suspect if you're in the same room as Ms. Crow, that's why the feedback is going on.
We're just gonna share a screen.
Okay.
Is that better?
Much better, thank you.
I feel like we're too close given COVID at this point in time, so our apologies.
You're both being responsible and have your mask on, so you're setting an example for all of us. So you have the floor.
Well, listen, we wanted to thank you, Mr. Chairman, and the rest of the council for allowing us to be here today, and want to echo what Mr. Stevenson has said regarding our relationship with CPA and CRB, and really trying to live up to the vision that the city has for community outreach and street outreach work. And we revamped our organization over the years. We've got an interim director here in Maisha Crow. The board is working really hard to finalize our staffing plans as we go forward. And we've invested in a number of different resources to help our organization really, number one, address the needs of our community, but do a good job listening. And then bringing into the work a more comprehensive approach to really professionalize the work that we do with street outreach, and then meet the needs. And Maisha will go through this of the work as it is more circuitous and holistic in the work that we do in the hospitals and with the juvenile justice system, and how that all works in partnership with the outreach team. So we're happy to answer a lot of questions from the group today. We also want to make sure that everyone here on this safety committee is aware of the work we're doing and has an invitation to meet with us or have us come out to your ward and share with each of you what we're doing. But we couldn't be more excited about the work that we're doing, particularly as it relates to building efficacy around critical incidents response and really professionalizing a lot of the work that we've been doing. So we're happy to be here. Thank you for allowing us to be here, and we look forward to a continued partnership.
Great. Thank you, first of all, for your leadership, Chairman, and serving on the board. Ms. Crow, could you speak a little bit, talk about like a typical day for somebody who's working for your organization? Talk about the work that they do.
Right. So our organization is broken down into different components. So the foundation of our program is, as you guys know, is street outreach, where we have our credible messengers who are in the communities with their boots on the ground, using their relationships to, at a street level approach, figure out how do we end gun violence. Traditionally, it will look a little bit different, but with COVID-19 in place, we had to make a lot of modifications to how our work is done and still doing the work safely for our staff members and our potential participants. So a day will look, a day in the work of CPA and CRB is that we will have a meeting to talk about what is going on in our communities. We have an outreach worker who will have the information as it relates to shots fired. Our hospital liaison will have a report to how many gunshot victims have been seen in either Metro Hospital and or University Hospital. We will have a briefing about what is our way to follow up and or go to these communities to make sure that we are meeting the needs of the participants, their families, with the wraparound approach, the participants, their families, and making sure that we can help reduce the retaliatory effects of those family members, not just the victim, but the family members who are going through the pain as well, as one of their loved ones have been a victim of gun violence. So we'll try to go to the hot spots that our director of outreach outlines, where the shots are being fired or where young people are hanging out in front of stores. We know that the rec centers and boys and girls clubs and other places have been shut down due to the virus. So we have to be very, very creative to where we find these young people congregating at. So just being a presence, following up and making sure that we're doing our part to prevent violence and to educate the community about the current violence that is going on in our city.
So let me pose this question to Director Stevenson, and if anyone from, Director Howard or the police want to respond to this, and then I'd like to hear from the Peacemakers Alliance. Talk about the work, how do they work in coordination with city officials, the Community Relations Department, the Cleveland Police? Director Stevens, can you address that question?
Sure, Councilman Zone. So we have Maisha and myself, we have a regular weekly meeting where we talk about the stats of shootings in the city of Cleveland and how we need to coordinate our effort to make sure that we are reaching the right population. We have come up with a strategy that we will work in a certain district until we have built relationships strong enough that we will not need to be there per se, but we'll have allies in that district who are able to help us identify bad actors and prevent some of the gun violence that's going on just by simply making a phone call to us and letting us know what's taking place in the community. So that's some of the revamping that I was talking about is going on with the relationship between CRB and CPA. Now, however, we do have, out of my department, we do have people assigned to certain districts where those are their districts that they work in on a regular basis, but they are not set there permanently. So with our strategy that I just talked about, we're moving from district to district, and I'm glad I see Councilwoman Cleveland on because I can use her ward as an example. What we found out is once we have identified a district that has had a lot of gun violence in it, and we go in and we build relationships with these young people, we're able to use them as allies so that when we move to another district, they have been giving phone calls to us about some of the violence that's going to take place, and we've been able to prevent that. Now, I'm sure you know that there's no way we can quantify that in numbers to say that we've saved this amount of lives because of the phone calls or because of the relationships that we've made. But we know for certain that we have stopped retaliations, we have stopped shootings, we have stopped events that was going to take place because of relationships that we've built in those communities. And so we've seen this practice work around the country. We've instituted that here in the city of Cleveland. And so now with CPA on board with us, we have more people in those communities that know some of the players in that community that are able to connect us with those players and vice versa. And so it helps us to build those relationships in there so that when we're not in that district, like I said, we can make a phone, or they make a phone call to us, or we make a phone call to them if we hear something going on, and it'll shut down whatever's happening in that community. And so, as I said before, I'm thankful about the relationship because CPA brings a lot of credible messengers from the communities in which we work in that helps us do the work that we need to do from CRB, and also help with the connection that we have with CPD. And talking about that connection, I'll tell you about, so we connect with the crime analysts at CPD who will send us stats about gun violence or shootings to let us know where the hotspots are. We're able to share that information. Maisha and I can sit down and look at that information and make a determination as to where we need to place our resources, where we need to go have an event, maybe set up a place where they give out hot dogs or something like that. And so we're able to share that information and really be strategic about how we work those different areas so that we make sure that we're covering the area properly and not just having our people scattered out and just doing work that's not really going to bring us the results that we're looking for.
No, that was well said, Director. I have often said at these committee hearings that it really takes a community, takes a village to make the community safer. And too often we rely solely on the police to solve all of our problems. And it's quite frankly, it's unfair towards local law enforcement that we put so much reliance on them to solve other people's problems. And what you're doing at a very granular level, working with people, meeting them where they are, speaking to them, and making them feel comfortable that there's somebody who's out there as a trusted resource, what leads to less violence on our streets. I remember 5 years ago, we had an individual from New York City who runs a similar program who came to our safety committee and testified in support of this type of initiative, which ultimately led towards funding to fund this program through your department, Director. So I appreciate at a high level the work that you're doing and that the Cleveland Peacemakers are doing on the streets. I have, let's open it up to some questions, but before I do, any comments from the Division of Police about their work and the work of the Cleveland Peacemakers Alliance? Is that yes, no, maybe?
Hold on.
Okay.
Just real briefly, Mr. Chairman, we just want to make sure that we strengthen our alliance with the Peacemakers. Before this transition, I'd say 2 or 3 years ago, we had a great relationship. There was a great group of folks that did a lot of work in the community. And we're just looking forward to this new crop that we have in there now and furthering those relationships, especially at the district level. So I encourage Mrs. Crow and the folks in the Alliance to make stops at the districts themselves at roll calls to make sure they familiarize themselves with the officers and the supervisors in those particular districts.
That's a great suggestion. If you could help facilitate that work with Ms. Crow and her team, make that easy so it's for her just to go up at roll calls and so Ms. Crow, any response?
Can I speak to that, Chair?
Sure will. So I get a response from Ms. Crow. I'll come to you next. No, actually, I have Councilman Polensek, Phyllis Cleveland, and then I'll put you on the list. Ms. Crow?
I just want to say that, being in this position, I am open to work with everybody. Like, I'm willing to work with everybody to make sure that the needs of the community is being met. And with Director Stevenson helping bridge those relationships with you all, that we're going to do what we need to do to make sure our community is safe.
Very good. Chief, I'm glad you're here for this hearing. Let me open it up to questions from our colleagues. I have Councilman Polensek, Councilman Cleveland, Councilman Bashir Jones, Councilman Joe Jones. Councilman Polensek. Councilman, unmute yourself, please.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Thank you very much. So, Mr. Chairman, I appreciate, and to my honorable colleagues and to the administration, I appreciate the information that we were provided as well, because I've gone over it. Here's my concern, as I've expressed, and I expressed this last time when peacemakers came to the table. I have virtually no engagement with them in the 5th District at all. So I don't really know what they're doing in the 5th District. And obviously, we're all experiencing what's been spoken very clearly this morning. We're all seeing an uptick in violent crime in the city, felonious assaults, and this last weekend spoke for itself. 27 people shot in the city. So I'm concerned about the people on the street. I want to see engagement. I'm a street council person. I'm in the street. And so I, for the life of me, I can't begin to tell you, if my life depended on when the last time I had any engagement with the peacekeepers, period. Secondly, as our own staff knows down here, John James specifically, I've been talking about creating something in the 5th District along the same lines. I've been talking with people. I've talked with Charles C. I've talked with some other folks about creating my own group of individuals that can get out there in the street and be proactive and do some, what I want to call street intelligence, and work with not only my office, but, Commander Morrison in the 5th District. So that's what I need to understand. I understand you have folks at the hospital, at UH and at Metro, but I just don't see the engagement. If it's there, no one's telling me. We don't get a report. Maybe if you send us something on a quarterly basis or something to give us some updates as to what the activities are, I would feel better at this point. But right now, I'm being asked to support this initiative again, as I have in the past. But I have no engagement with them. I don't know what they're doing in the 5th District. I don't know what they're doing in Glenville or in the Collinwood community. So I'm going to stop there, and I'd like to hear a response.
Yeah, and I, as the chair of the committee, I would ask that Director Stevens coordinate with Ms. Crow and her team and create an opportunity so you can have, I want them to respond to the question, but this is a request. I want to make sure that there is actual engagement with Councilman Polensek or any other councilman that requested to know specifically what's happening within their respective neighborhoods. Director Stevens, and then I'd like to hear from the Cleveland Peacemakers Alliance.
So to the chairman, to the councilman, I'm not quite sure. I didn't hear the entire question, but from what I did hear, I'm going to try and respond to. Councilman Polensek, as in the past, we do work in every district in the city of Cleveland. And one reason that you don't see any of the Peacemakers Alliance in your district is exactly what we don't want our guys to be able to be identified. We want them to be as mixed in with the community as we can possibly have. That way they can do better work. When they're not identified as being attached to the city, they're able to get in and really get to know some of the players and keep their street cred with those individuals that are out there doing the work. Now, I can say we can maybe get you or send a report to council quarterly. And I know I attend John James meetings, and we do give a report as to what we're doing. And I know the previous director of Cleveland Peacemakers Alliance was attending those meetings before COVID came in and shut the meetings down. So I'm sure that we'll have participation from CPA in the future at those meetings. Like I said, we work very well together in every district in the city of Cleveland. You know, my guys are out there. As a matter of fact, we are working now, right now, as we speak, in the 5th district. We are there. Now, I don't want to get into specifics about what we're doing in the 5th district, but we are working right now in the 5th district. So when we can give you a report on that, Mr. Chair, we will be glad to send something to council so that you can see what we're doing in the community. But right now, I don't want to jump ahead, and I don't want to say too much about what's going on. Just we are working in the 5th district as I speak.
Separate from the report, Director, again, my request, I want you to follow up with Councilman Polensek and the Peacemakers Alliance. There are some conversations that are better left directly between you and the Peacemakers Alliance and the councilman as opposed to in this setting. Cleveland Peacemaker Alliance, any response?
What if I can, Mr. Chairman, what I will say to the councilman is we will set up a time where we can meet with you directly, myself and the interim director, and maybe even Kevin. We can sit down and we can meet with you and talk to you face to face about some of the things that we're doing in the 5th district. I'm sorry, you were addressing Maisha at this point.
Ms. Crowe or Kevin, anything you want to say in response?
Yeah, I would just thank you for the question, and thank you for also a bit of a challenge for us to do a better job. And we quite frankly would echo and agree with what has been shared. A big part of our goals going forward, and something that I've shared with the board as well as the staff, is that we have to do a much better job of building both alignment, collaboration, and transparency across our organization. And that not only includes what we're doing internally, but with our external stakeholders. So our funders like the Cleveland Foundation and others who help support this work, it is really important. And so what you'll see from Maisha and the team as we go forward is a lot less necessarily management of the individual team, which has really taken up a lot of time and energy and resources, and allowing then this person, in this case being Maisha, to get out and about in the community to build the key relationships, not only the relationships that matter on the ground, but the relationships at the city council level and others that are really important. So our ability even today to hear from you on what your needs are really does help us then frame out our process in terms of where we're going to invest our time. So I hope once this COVID-19 passes, you'll be seeing Maisha's face and our team's face in and around and about your offices more often, so we can have those direct relationships and answer these tough questions in person, and quite frankly, help guide and shape the strategy as we go forward.
Great. So a follow-up request, Director Stevenson, I want you to create an opportunity for a phone conference with you, Councilman Mike Polensek, and Cleveland Peacemakers Alliance.
Yes, to the chair, if I can, I think I heard Councilman Polensek talk about having relationships with other organizations. I know there's been some organizations who worked with us in the past, and some of those organizations I still have a good working relationship with. So they are still part of what we do in the community. They're just not working for Cleveland Peacemakers Alliance. So just so the councilman knows, from our department, we still have a good relationship with a lot of those organizations that are out there working on the ground. So
very good. Majority Leader Phyllis Cleveland, then Councilman Bashir Jones, and Councilman Joe Jones. Majority Leader Cleveland.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning. I have a few questions, and thank you, Chairman Zone, for bringing the peacemakers to the table. You know, one thing I learned, I met with them, well, it was last summer in 2019. And at that point, I learned that there had been pretty much a revamping of the organization. And so I think a lot of our colleagues, you know, some who've been around for a while and who haven't sat down with them may still be thinking of the old operation and the people that we were familiar with who did the peacemakers work. So I would hope that everyone takes the opportunity to sit down with them and learn what the organization is doing now. And that accounts for some of the confusion, things that we expected from them as we got in the past. things are different. It's a different organization, and the mission, I think, has changed to some degree, although the ultimate goal is to disrupt and decrease the violence in our community. So, and also I want to say thank you to Director Stevenson. He's been very responsive with the issues I've had in my ward, and we talk quite a bit. And I try to monopolize as much of his time and resources as I can. And I admit that. I do have a few questions, and through the chair to Ms. Crow or Mr. Griffin. First of all, I understand, Ms. Crow, you're the interim director, and I've seen that you are looking for a permanent executive director. Through the chair, I wanted to ask how that process is going, and when do you expect to have a permanent director on board? Because I know a lot of the things that you need to do as an organization, you really can't do or follow through on until you have a permanent director.
Ms. Crow?
Guys, if you don't mind, and I'll take that question, given that that's a board-led function. We are, the job has been posted. It was posted, I want to say a week ago or so. If you don't mind, just indulge me for a minute. It was really important for us during COVID to kind of lock down what we were doing with our staff. We've had staff members who've been affected by COVID. We wanted to make sure that the safety and health of our staff was preeminent and most important thing that we took care of. So we spent a lot of time working with what we were doing, both from a staff standpoint, from a safety standpoint, and then from an operational standpoint. How will we operate during this time? From there, then we worked with our board to identify what we needed to do in terms of how to build the right job description. That job description has been posted. It will be posted for about another 5 days. We've received over 30 applications so far, a good cohort of folks who have applied for this role. But in the meantime, we've also had Maisha leading this work and building a relationship and the efficacy with the CRB group in the city, which has really allowed us to continue to operate. So our goal is to have someone in place by September 1st, if possible. And I do appreciate your point, Councilwoman Cleveland. We really do need to have that person in place so we can begin to move forward. It will also help once this COVID-19 issue is gone, so we can get back up and running to full capacity. Right now, we're operating with 13 or 14 full-time staff members. When we're fully operational, we're at 17. So we've got some gaps there to fill in terms of staffing. But we would hope to have everyone staffed up, our organization staffed up and fully operational by October 1st, given the situation with COVID-19. Thank you for the question.
Thank you. Through the chair, I'll just say peacemakers, for either you, Ms. Crow, or Mr. Griffin to answer. You mentioned you have 13 staff members. You hope to have 17 to be fully staffed. How many of those are outreach workers? And the other part of my question, let me put this question first. Ms. Crow, you had mentioned that your work is divided into 4 components or four areas. And I'm sorry, I kind of missed how you laid that out. I know you started with outreach, and can you just clarify again what those 4 areas of work are? And then I want to know how many outreach workers you have, and what they do in relation to those 4 areas.
So thank you for that question. So we have our case management component, we have our trauma hospital response component, and we have our community component. Our community component is our outreach team. And although we have outreach workers inside of the hospital, they're still considered a part of our community outreach team. So our case management team, we have 3 case managers. Prior to this transition, I was the case manager supervisor. So we have 3 case managers, a case manager supervisor, and then we have 2 people inside of both hospitals. And then we have the other part of our team in the communities. So it's important to know that the 2 individuals that are inside of the hospital are a coverage model. So they are a dual response where their strengths are to be on call in the hospital once we are notified that a young person has become a victim of gun violence. With their other time and efforts, they are in the community to help with the main focus of our program, which is the street outreach component.
Thank you. Through the chair, with respect to the outreach workers, I know generally if I got an issue, I'm calling Director Stevenson or one of the CRB representatives that are working in our community. And just in terms of if we think we need more input or more involvement from peacemakers, how do we do that? Can we call you, call your peacemakers directly, or should we, we don't have to go through Director Stevenson, if have put on, and I'll say that, there's a lot of information we also have as council members. People come to us and talk to us confidentially about things that are happening in the neighborhood, and it's information that we need to pass on to the right person. So, if we got something, can we come directly to peacemakers? Yeah. And I'm not trying to be a director, but sometimes it's things get lost in translation and communication.
Yeah, so you can definitely reach out directly to myself and my co-leader, who is Antonio McMullen. We are the two people who you will be able, who everyone in this platform and the community can reach out to. I think it's really important you making the point that you too have information. I think it's important that we all work together collectively in using our relationships, not just our street credibility, but our relationships that people have to us because of who we are, and use that information together so we can help, help reduce violence from our seat and leading from the seats that we are in as well. So I think that that's really important. And I will share my contact information with you all through Matt Zone, and he can pass it along or send it through Director Stevenson, and he can share my information until I meet with every one of you personally.
If I could, Councilwoman Cleveland, what I'd like to do is, and the Council Lady raises a good question. We want to respect protocol, but it would be good if we would know exactly names, phone numbers, emails of individuals who we can interact with at Cleveland Peacemakers Alliance. You could send that directly to me or forward it to Director Stevenson, so I can then share it with all my colleagues. It would also be nice, this morning I sent out a brief a report, an update that Maisha prepared for her and her team in response, but we want to keep this communication going. Councilwoman Cleveland.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a couple of other things. I was trying to read my own notes. Through the chair, I think either Director Stevenson or Ms. Crow mentioned John James meeting, and I'm just trying to clarify, is that the DOJ meeting that happens monthly on the third Tuesday, or is this a separate meeting that our esteemed Mr. James is hosting?
Director Stevenson, I believe, Council Lady, that this is the initiative around youth violence, but Director Stevenson, you referenced that the Cleveland Peacemakers Alliance will be attending and actively participating in the meetings Mr. James is convening. Can you speak on that, please?
So John James hosts a meeting for violence prevention from council that he holds, I think, once a month. And in the past, myself and the director for Cleveland Peacemakers Alliance both attended that meeting. So I'm assuming once this COVID thing is over with, he'll get those meetings revamped, and we'll be back at those meetings once again. If I could, I would like to, I know Maisha is excited about the opportunity to engage with all of you all, but I would hesitate on the side of everybody reaching out to Peacemakers Alliance, and let's try and keep this thing in house so that we can keep a little order about what we're doing. I don't mind the phone calls. When Councilman Polinsek calls me, I get that information to who it needs to go to so that we can better coordinate our efforts. Also the same thing with Councilwoman Phyllis Cleveland. Any council person who calls my office, I'll make sure that that information gets to the proper people that it needs to go to. Now, I think we can have those meetings where we can sit down with CPA and also the council person. But I would suggest that we keep those phone calls going through the Department of Community Relations, just so we're not too spread out, and so that we can kind of keep a handle on the work that we're doing.
Councilwoman Cleveland.
Thank you. Just going back to my previous question regarding the meeting, this is not the stance meeting, right, that you're referring to with John James? The stance meeting with the Department of Justice? Because again, that program's been around for a long time, and it's, the focus is on the reduction of youth violence and gang violence, and the DOJ hosts that, but there are a lot of our usual neighborhood partners who are participants in that meeting.
I'm sorry, Chair, to the Councilwoman, I could not hear that question. It was really broken up. So if you could repeat it for me.
Sure. I'm just clarifying the meeting meeting is, that's different from the monthly stance meeting that the Department of Justice hosts and has been hosting for a long time.
The stance meeting, I'm sorry, to the Chair, to the Councilwoman, the stance meeting is different than the meeting that John James is hosting.
Okay, that's all I wanted to know. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you for your line of questions. I appreciate you. Councilman Joe Jones. Councilman Bashir Jones. Councilman Bashir Jones.
Had okayed.
Thank you so much.
That was so much fun.
Hold on, so we're getting some serious feedback from somebody. Councilman Joe Jones, you're next. Councilman Bashir Jones, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you. First, I wanted to go back because what makes these type of organizations receptive to the community is that they're not looked at as police organizations. So I just want to be very mindful, and I'm sure they understand that you can work with the police, but as soon as you have, unfortunately, especially the demographic that this group is supposed to be reaching, if you are looked at as a police organization, that removes all opportunity to have the type of conversation that you need to have. So I'm sure that they understand that. Number two, Councilman Polinsek said something very important, because that's very true. I'm not sure either of who is working in my neighborhood, and this idea that this is like a covert operation that I can't know is not something that I would, then why would I support something like that? Because there are people like myself and Councilman Polinsek and others who are in the community and who know people and are respected. So the idea that what I would like to know, Chair, is I want to know directly who are the people who are working in my community, because they may not have, or they may, I don't know, but I'm just saying, they may not have the credibility that they think they have, right? So I need to know who they are, because when I have an issue in my community, I know exactly who to call, depending on what neighborhood it is. I know exactly who to reach out to. I know exactly who to have a conversation with, and I know exactly who to get the information from. So if there's people coming in from Cleveland Peacemakers Alliance who are outsiders, right? And I'm not saying there's anything wrong, quote unquote, with being an outsider, but you have to understand that when you're coming into a new territory, you connect with the people of that territory, right? I mean, that's a simple equation. So, Chair, I want to know who's working with the Cleveland Peacemakers Alliance, who is focused on my community, who's working in my community. And if they are not, and I want to be able to have a relationship with the Cleveland Peacemaker Might to say, these people who you have. Now I'm just saying this because I don't know if this is truth or not, because maybe they do have influence, or maybe they are. I don't know, because I don't know who they are. But I want to be able to say, no, these are not the people who have the influence. These are the people who really have. And this is the people that you need to either look at bringing on board, or at least you need to have a working relationship with them. So that's extremely important, Chair.
Good point. Kevin, I think you heard a comment from our colleagues. Again, I think it would be important for the sake of not naming names or individuals who are working in his particular area. I think I would strongly recommend you work through Director Stevenson. Director Stevenson set up a time with Councilman Bashir Jones so he knows who are the interrupters who are working in the Ward 7 area. Councilman Bashir Jones, any other comments?
No, Chair. Thank you so much.
Okay, appreciate you. Councilman Joe Jones.
Yes, can you hear me okay, Mr. Chairman?
Sound great, Joe.
Okay, great. Mr. Chairman, how long has this organization been in existence?
Director Stevenson? Because I know there's different iterations of the organization. So the question was, or I can go to Ms. Crow or to Kevin, Mr. Griffin, how long has Cleveland Peacemakers Alliance been in existence?
So, Chair, to the CPA has been in existence since 2007, I believe, 2007, 2008. So there has been a couple different fashions of CPA, but they have been in existence over 10 years.
And Mr. Chairman, I can concur with my colleagues. I'm not quite sure what they're doing in my neighborhood as well. And I don't know what they're doing. Can they explain what they're doing in the Lee Harvard Ward 1 area? And here's why I asked. We're a changing community to some degree. We have a serious issue of violence and crime. Before I took office, thank God I haven't had any of this since I've been in office, is drive-by shootings. We were getting drive-by shootings in the middle of the day in 2016 and 2017. And we are still having violence and people getting shot and killed in our community. There's a lot of young people in our neighborhood now. In addition to that, we're seeing an uptick in violence, just general casual violence. And we have gang elements in our community. So I would like to know what it is, or do they have, and if they don't know, if they could go and find out, what's their body of work that they have done in the Lee Harvard Ward 1 area. And if they could briefly prepare a presentation for me on what they're doing, and also who are the people working for them in our community, I'd like to know that. Can we get that information, Mr. Chairman?
Director Stevenson.
So, Chair, to the councilman, there's a lot of prevention efforts going on in Ward 1 as well as the rest of the city. We would love to have an opportunity to sit down and go over it one-on-one with you and any other council person who wants to meet with us along with CPA. We would be glad to do that. What I can tell you is there's been a great deal of effort going on throughout the city with CRB and CPA with crime prevention. Now, I do want to remind everybody that we are not CPD, so we do prevention work to stop a lot of the shootings. But as I said before, there's no way that we can count and say that we stopped 7 shootings in Ward 1. We can't do that. But what we can say is we've been successful with a lot of young people in Ward 1, and also a lot of young adults in Ward 1 with the work that we've been doing. We've had a partnership with John F. Kennedy for a while, as well as every other high school in the city of Cleveland and middle school in the city of Cleveland that we work with on a regular basis when they're open. Every rec center, every pool, we're somewhere involved in that neighborhood. We have a relationship with beauty shop and barbershop owners. We have a relationship with business owners, especially in the Lee Harvard Shopping Plaza, where we work with on a daily basis. So the people from CRB and CPA are out there. As Councilman Ashir Jones said, and I want to echo that, we don't want it to be where we are identified with City Hall or with CPD so that people begin to shut down on us. Them keeping their low profile is part of what makes them successful in the work that they do in the community. So where I would agree that it is good for you to know who the people are that's running, Maisha and Kevin and myself and those that are in charge. I don't know, however, how good it would be for a lot of people to know who the interrupters are that are in the community actually doing the work. Because just as you begin to know, so does a lot of other people begin to know, and then they begin to tie them in with the administration, and it kills some of the work that we're able to do. So it's not that we don't want you to know, we just don't want to take away their credibility in the streets and their ability to do the work that they're hired to do. I want to address
Well,
Bashir Jones said,
well,
listen, we do have street credible individuals from neighborhoods throughout the city of Cleveland. We would not bring anybody forward who's not credible in the community. And I know Councilman Jones, both Councilman Jones, I know you guys are out there in the community. I have relationships, like I said, with other organizations that are in your community. If I need to know something or I need to get something, I know when to reach out to you or when to reach out to those individuals who do work in your community to share that information with CPA so that we make sure that we're all marching to the same beat to get you the results that you.
Right. Well, I don't have no problem, Mr. Chairman, with working with. I'm sorry. Did you want to speak, Mr. Chairman?
No.
No, that was me. I apologize.
Okay, no worries. Mr. Chairman, I hear what Mr. Grady is saying. I mean, I understand where he's coming from, but as a duly elected official representing over 25,700 people, it is my right to know, especially if I'm at the table to approve any legislation concerning this. I should have every detail and depth of what's going on in my neighborhood. In fact, not to have this hearing and not know really much about what they're actually doing in my neighborhood, and they've been in existence since 2007 is unacceptable. Not to have any of their organizations or their institutions or the people who they work for, or even Mr. Grady, to come and sit down and talk to me about what it is that is happening in our neighborhood, some kind of course or plan to deal with the violence in the community. And let me say this, Mr. Chairman, I don't think that they are totally responsible for all of the issues. I think that they should certainly, I would hope that they would be working very closely with the police department because basically the police department's responsibility is to do this work. They are responsible for protecting and serving our community. And that is where we need to start looking at why we're having an increase in crime and all of these kinds of things that are devastating our neighborhood and people leaving out of the city of Cleveland is because of the crime. No one wants to live in a neighborhood where you have violence and crime. No one wants to pay $400,000 for a home and then, they pull out in their BMW or whatever they're driving and get carjacked. In no community. Whether it's a $400,000 house or a $75,000 house or a $25,000 house, the issue is people want to be safe. And so, Mr. Chairman, I want to ask this question to the organization, and I certainly look forward to working with Mr. Grady and the organization to know exactly what it is that they're doing in my neighborhood, because I have no clue. So the question is, how big is your organization in terms of people? How many people is in that organization?
So it was already discussed. It's an organization funded for 17, currently staffed at 13, and they're working to hire the remaining 4.
So what is your annual budget, Mr. Chairman, for this organization? What is the annual budget of the organization?
Is that a question directed to me?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I'm sorry about that. Yes, it's a little over $1 million. And we can share that budget with you as well. Here's, if you don't mind, that I could share with this group. So I think it's important what I'm hearing, and I think Councilwoman Cleveland said it very well and very eloquently, and that is that, you know, there's been an evolution of this organization, this program, and what I'm hearing, quite frankly, is that not everyone here is aware of what we're doing. There seems to be a lack of understanding, and we just need to level set with this group at the appropriate time. I wish we were all together in person. We could provide you with a clear understanding of the work that we're doing and how that works in partnership with CRB, how that works in partnership with others. But all of you throughout this conversation today have really brought up great points that we need to be at the table at together in order to move forward. I think you'll see a different approach. I think you'll see a different attitude that this organization has today. We have gaps, there's no doubt about it, but we want to get better in partnership with everyone here. I come from the private sector, and in the work that I do, when we have clients and partners, we do what are called quarterly business reviews. We sit down every quarter and provide an update of what's going on, how those resources have been allocated, what that's meant, what other outcomes, and we measure that and hold everyone accountable. You have my commitment, as long as I'm here in this role, that's how we will how we will perform going forward. That is important to us, and quite frankly, as I've shared with our board, and I hope this is okay for me to share, if we can't get it done, then we have to have other people put in place to do it. So this is a group of people that are committed to this work and getting it done and providing not only accountability to the city council in this group, but to the citizens, most importantly, and the young people whose lives we're trying to save. So know this, that we're on the same page. We hear your points of view. We know that's coming from a place of goodness and not criticism, but we're here to be partners.
And Mr. Chairman, I didn't get the distinguished gentleman's name earlier. I like his response. What's your name, sir?
My name is Kevin Griffin.
Mr. Griffin, if you got a pen and piece of paper, I'd like for you to write my number down. It's 216-355-0017. That is my cell phone number. And you can reach me 24/7. I also give that number out to all my citizens so they can reach me as well.
I appreciate that.
Now, what I would like to say, Mr. Chairman, is what is the city's financial obligation or commitment to this organization?
Director Stevenson, our contractual relationship, the question is, what's our contractual relationship with the Cleveland?
Our contractual relationship is $200,000.
And Mr. Chairman, to Mr. Stevenson, and this has been $200,000 every single year since their existence?
I can respond to that. No.
It broke up again, Mr. Chairman. I'm sorry.
Is that $200,000, Mr. Chairman, to Director Grady, that has been since 2007? Have we been paying that?
Chair, to the councilman, if I heard him correctly. If I heard him correctly, yes, it's $200,000.
Okay.
For every year, Mr. Chairman, since 2007?
Councilman Joe Jones. Director Stevens, hold on a second. Hold on. Time out. No, it's not been $200,000 every year. This is the contractual relationship we're in this year. I remember when the program first began, it was a much more modest investment in this initiative. So, Director Stevenson, the question is, do you recall right now, historically, how much money the city of Cleveland has invested in the Cleveland Peacemaker Alliance on an annual basis?
I do not recall that number. I can get that for you, but I know it was higher than what we're offering now.
Councilman Joe Jones.
And Mr. Chairman,
Councilman Jones, your phone
are capable of doing.
You're froze. Restate the question. Your image froze.
My image phrase. Can you hear me now?
Yes, sound great. Councilman, your screen is locked and we can't hear anything coming out of your computer. Technology, right? Councilman,
right.
Are you with us?
While we're waiting, Mr. Chairman, if I can, I just want to make everything clear. I'm not by any means saying that I don't want council to know what CPA is doing. I just want to caution them on us bringing out all of the individuals who are doing the work in the community for basically what the reason that Councilman Bashir Jones said. We don't want them to start being identified as part of CPD or City of Cleveland, because then that really prevents them from being able to do an effective job out there on the ground.
Yeah, we got that point, Director. And
Chair, can I speak to that, Chair?
Mr. Chairman,
yeah, hold on, Councilman. Hold on. Some things were going on while you were off the call. I'm gonna come back to you. You have the floor.
thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Did somebody mention something?
To that point, Chair?
Councilman Bashir Jones on this point.
Thank you, Chair. The problem with that is that as council people, I would like to know, because I can point certain people to their direction as well. So if they're moving adverse to how I'm moving, then you're causing extra problems. Even though we work for the city, you know, some of us are in the community, right? And people depend on us. And we know things that are getting ready to happen or possibly could happen. So that's the point. And the second point is, if you have outsiders, and even if they are quote unquote respected in other neighborhoods, we know that the city of Cleveland is a neighborhood driven city. So if you have people in Huff that's from Glenville or from Collinwood, they don't know the people in Huff. So I really hope, I mean, as we talk more about this, Chair, I'm really interested in seeing who the people are, because people from Huff who are from 79, from St. Clair, you know, they should be the ones working with the Peacemakers Alliance. It shouldn't be somebody from, you know, Columbus coming in, and I'm just making something up, but they shouldn't come from a different city working in Huff. That doesn't make sense at all.
Can I speak?
Yeah.
Chair to the councilman.
Hold on, Ms. Crowe. Point well taken, Councilman Bashir Jones. Councilman Joe Jones has the floor. I'm going to get a response from Director Stevenson and then Maisha Crowe. Director Stevenson.
Chair to the councilman. Again, we have credible messengers from the neighborhoods. And as I stated before, I have relationships, Councilman B. Jones, especially in Ward 7. I have credible messengers in that area that know my outreach guys, and we know them, and they've been in the Huff area for many years. And so when I say that we're tied to districts, I have people who have been in those districts forever. We have done a very good job of being strategic of the type of people that we've chosen from the neighborhoods that they come from, as well as their background and the work that they've done in the past. So I want council to rest assured that we are not going into this. The mayor has had us in this work now. I've been involved with it now for the last 15 years. And so I do believe that I'm familiar with what needs to be done in those communities. And I wouldn't bring someone in your community because not only would I put them in a bad situation, but I could put them at risk. And so I wouldn't do that. I think that
I hear
PA has chosen the people that.
Hold on, Councilman, hold on. Director Stevenson, I hear your point, but the key message, the takeaway here, and Ms. Crowe, I recognize her, so she's going next. And then we're going to go back to final comments from Councilman Bashir Jones and then back to Joe Jones. The key takeaway here, communication. You hear from my colleagues, they're not intimately aware of who's working in their communities and the scope of the work. And you hear a plea coming from several individuals. So communication is key. We're going to follow up directly with Councilman Mike Polensek, Joe Jones, and Bashir Jones. Maisha, you have the floor, and then I'm going to go back to Councilman Bashir Jones.
Thank you. I just similar to what Chair Councilman Matt Zone mentioned, I hear the plea and the deeper understanding of what CPA is doing. And as my board chair Kevin mentioned, we do have gaps. And while we're growing into this organization that can service the entire city, we do need the help from people like Councilman Bashir Jones, who was saying, I know these known players, I know these people. And if we can connect let's do it. Like, we gotta fill the gaps. Like, how do we fill the gaps while we're growing into what we know we need to be for the city? And it's just about communication and being open and being transparent to know that, yo, growing is not always easy and change is not always easy. And how do we do that together? And knowing that our goals, our vision is the same. How do we make our community safer? Like, it is what it is at this point. What do we need to do? Like, despite all of the other titles or whatever else that are on the table, how do we just all put our boots on the ground, come to the table and say, like, this is what we need to do in our community? And that's all, and that's it. Like, progress comes slowly. I read this article, it said progress comes slowly and setbacks are frequent. Like, let's just do what we gotta do. The community is dependent on us. Let's talk it out. Let's bring all of our resources to the table, despite our titles, and meet the goal of what the city needs, and that's to reduce the violence.
Councilman Bashir Jones.
She should be the director. I don't know what her position is, but whatever position she's in, she needs to be the director because she understands it clear. She understands it clearly, Chair. That's it.
Duly noted.
Thank you, Councilman. Councilman Joe Jones, you're back on the floor, and then I have Councilman Mike Polensek. Councilman Joe Jones. Councilman Joe Jones, your phone is muted.
Can you hear me now, Mr. Chairman?
Perfect.
Thank you. Okay, excellent. I was on the line of questioning about the organization and its size. And my question was to the director at that point, and we just cut, and then got cut out, was the financial commitment of the city. It's my understanding that currently it's $200,000 right now.
Chair, to the councilman, that's correct.
Right. And so, Mr. Chairman, looking at the statement that this organization is supposed to be delivering deliverables, what do you have a body of work in terms of a report of what you have accomplished in the city within the last couple of years? Would be something I'd like to see, Mr. Chairman, in writing. And then number two, Mr. Chairman, I would like to also, work with this organization extensively. If it can do what it's saying it can do, Mr. Chairman, we certainly need the services. And we need to look at even increasing their salary. The 200,000 is a little small drop in the bucket in terms of what we could give them to expand their services. We need to have that. We need to let the citizens know that safety is a priority of this council. And safety first should be an issue. We have so many police officers, but we still don't have enough. So whatever little bit that we can help with, keeping our citizens safe, I think that's a good investment. But I do want to know if one of them are prepared, Mr. Kevin Griffin, I forget the distinguished lady that my colleague Bashir Jones likes. What's your name, ma'am?
My name is Maisha Crow.
Maisha Crow. Thank you, Ms. Crow. I'd like to work with you and Mr. Griffin. And can you tell me some examples of your organization has made in terms of making a difference in our communities? Or you can give an example in Ward 1.
I think the greatest example, Councilman Jones, is that we're really going through this training to professionalize the work. Like, this work was driven in the idea from the perspective of young men and women who want to make a change in their community. And while we're going through this training to develop a safe idea of what this work looks like, it's just really important, because if you're going into these neighborhoods only based on what you know, it can sometimes get you in a deeper hole than you want to be in. So professionalizing this work is one of the greatest examples of what we're doing. In Ward 1, we've been doing a lot of place-based events, like community pop-up events. Hold on, sorry, I need to get my wording together. To be more specific, I have a report that outlines what we've been doing in wards, and if you are open to it, I can send you that report after this so that I won't choke over my words.
Right, I don't mind, Mr. Chairman, the distinguished lady giving me the report. I just thought maybe, you would have an example you could give me, right on the top of your, head of what you've been able to do in my neighborhood. It doesn't matter if you go all the way back to 2007. If you could just give me one example, if you can, but if you can't, I understand. Did you hear that? Did I go out, Mr. Chairman?
No, we heard you, Councilman.
Okay.
So, and we will make sure Director Stevenson will follow up with you and get you prior reports and work of rights.
Right, and then, Mr. Chairman, I do have a lot of areas that I do want you guys to start working with me on. There's a number of areas in our community where I need to have assistance and help dealing with what appears to be, and I'm not sure, but we're having a lot of gang writing and graffiti on our sidewalks now of Bloods and Crips, and it's in our main commercial districts now. I mean, it's just so disrespectful to write in the smack heart of my neighborhood, Blood and Crips on the sidewalks. And so I don't know if you are aware of any of that activity. Let me ask this question. Do we have gangs? Have you monitored gangs in our neighborhood? And if so, how many gangs are in our community at this space and time?
I know that's a hard question for them to answer because their work is not involved in gang activity. Their work is centered around gun violence, gun discharging, going into hospitals, interviewing families, interviewing members of that community, and trying to make sure there aren't any retaliatory efforts. Director Stevenson, do you want to speak about gang activity?
There's no Blood and Crips in Cleveland.
Well, I'm glad you said that, Mr. Jones, but they're writing it all over my sidewalks. And
Yeah,
so then whether, and I don't know what's happening in your area, but this was certainly directed towards them because we're paying them. And if they're dealing with violence in our neighborhood, then they should be able to tell us if it's gangs or any kind of gangs, because if they're dealing with, Mr. Chairman, trying to resolve some of these issues and quiet things down and work with young people, I'm quite sure that they've come across this. And that's the reason why I asked the question, Mr. Chairman.
So to the chair, to the council, I would say, I agree with Councilman B. Jones. There's no Blood and Crips in Cleveland. However, we do have a lot of neighborhood cliques, and they may tag Blood or Crip just to have that on there because that's what they hear on the radio or see on TV or whatever. But we have very few organized organizations in the city of Cleveland. So to give you a number, Councilman Jay Jones, no, I cannot give you a number of how many are in your neighborhood at this time.
Right, and so then, Mr. Chairman, could Mr. Stevenson work with whoever in administration to help me to get erase the Blood and Crip signs in front of McDonald's on Lee Road on their sidewalks? There's Blood and Crips on DeForest Avenue, Mr. Chairman, on Lee Road, and there's a Blood and Crips right in front of
Councilman.
Well, no, Mr. Chairman, we're talking about
Councilman Joe Jones. We're not doing miscellaneous. We're not doing miscellaneous at this committee. All right.
That's fine. That's fine. And will we be able to do it after the fact?
Yeah,
because I know you're trying to shut me down. But can we do it after the fact?
Yes, we can.
Thank you. So, and ending up with this, Mr. Chairman, to Mr. Stevenson, it would be nice to see what they have to offer to our community. I wish they would have had something off the top of their head, because normally when someone can't give me a response, that means that they don't have one or they haven't done anything. And so, Mr. Chairman, I'm a straight shooter. I am, and some people might not like it. But if you're in my neighborhood, you would know exactly what's going on in my community. And you should be able to give me one example out of since 2007, what has happened in our community. So I would like to know that. I am a serious player on the ground, and I mean to take care of the business of my people. And I want my neighborhoods to be safe. And if this program is worth its weight, I don't mind, Mr. Chairman, working behind your leadership to put more money into it. But at the end of the day, I'm serious about my business, and my business is taking care of the interests of the citizens of the city of Cleveland in general, and my neighborhood in particular. So I definitely need the help of you, Mr. Chairman, to make that happen.
Absolutely. Thank you, Councilman. You've been going for 25 minutes. I'm going to go to Councilman Mike Polensek. Mike, unmute yourself.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I didn't have a chance to respond to Grady when he responded to my initial questions. But listening to this for the last half plus hour, you hear what the common denominator is. It's communications. I think the chairman just reinforced that. It's communications. You have council people that are very hands-on today in the streets, greatly concerned. We've talked about the increase of criminal activity. We increased number of homicides, increased number of felonious assaults, increase, you name it. You know, this last several weeks, I've never experienced anything like it, especially like with fireworks. I mean, I've never had anything like this before, constant from morning till night. But I'm not asking, and I like to say I'm speaking on behalf of my colleague. I'm not asking for you to walk around, your peacekeepers to walk around with day glow jackets on saying peacekeepers. We're not asking for that. We understand there's things that have to be done very privately and confidentially. We understand that, but the communication to us is so critical. So to let us know what you're doing and how you're doing, and if there's something that we need to be aware of, who do we contact, who we can send a text to, we can send an email to. A lot of us have lines out there, good lines out there in the street. I know I do. And so I work very closely with my commander and other people. And again, I've been dealing with other people who in their past lives made mistakes and were involved in gangs, and I work with them. They help me. I have an engagement with them. But it's all about communication. You come before us, you're asking for financial assistance, communications. We're dealing with different issues today. You're dealing with more aggressive council people than ever before, who just want to know what's going on in their neighborhood. That's all they're asking for. They want to know what's going on. So I hope that's the message I want to get. Communications, working together. You know, I'm not asking you to walk around with flashers on. I just want to know what you're doing in my neighborhood. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councilman Polensek. And I'm seeing the nods of affirmation from, you know, Director Stevenson, from Board Chair Griffin, from Maisha Crow. And so I appreciate all of you. I see no other hands up. I did want to answer the question that Councilman Phyllis Cleveland asked earlier. I did get a text message from John James. The meeting that Director Stevenson, excuse me, was referring to is the Subcommittee for Violence Prevention, which is under the Healthy Cleveland Initiative. They meet bi-monthly in the large conference room, and John James serves as the co-chair. So I apologize. I'm choking here. We're getting close to wrapping up this hearing. Councilman Brian Casey.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I just would be remiss if we didn't have a safety committee meeting and recognize the loss that the Cleveland Police Department took this week with the retirement of Captain Sulzer. And we know that everybody on this meeting today, in one way or another, has been either worked with him or he's been touched by his work in the community. And I think the Peacemakers Alliance and the work that Captain Sulzer has done throughout his 30-year career is a good indication of collaboration between police and people on the street. So I would just be remiss if we didn't recognize all his hard work and dedication and congratulate him on his retirement. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councilman Casey. I appreciate that. We've all have built a fond working relationship with Commander Sulzer, and appreciate all he's done, his 30 years of service to our city and our organization. Maisha, thank you for joining us. Chairman Griffin, I appreciate you. Thank you. Both of you, I think, have a clear vision, and my colleagues, as you've heard from several of them, communication is the key. Director Stevenson is going to facilitate conversations directly with 3 council people who asked it out of today's committee. So if there's anything you take away from this meeting, it's communication, communication, communication. I want to make sure there's follow-up by Director Stevenson with Councilman Joe Jones, Councilman Mike Polensek, Councilman Bashir Jones about the work that they're doing. And as far as any of the other miscellaneous activity within those respective wards, that intelligence can be shared at that time. And we will clearly establish a protocol on how we communicate moving forward.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Councilman Tony Brancatelli.
I'm sorry, I thought my hand raised was up. Yeah, I just wanted to just take a quick shout out and welcome them to Ward 12. My understanding is they're going to be moving into the historic Atlas building as part of their offices. So we're excited that they're located in the heart of our neighborhoods that are central to the east side. So welcome.
And that is an invitation from Councilman Brancatelli for lunch at Seven Roses, fabulous restaurant, and he will wine and dine you and show you all the great stuff happening in Slavic Village. I appreciate everyone. Thank you for participating. Thank you for your feedback around our ordinance, around street closures, and we will follow up with those suggestions with the administration and hopefully get that ready before we move that legislation on. I see a couple of hands just quickly raised. Councilman Mike Polensek, brief comment. Mike, go ahead, Mike. Unmute yourself, Mike.
Sorry, Mr. Chairman. I just had a miscellaneous question. We understand that the CPD command staff is doing a review of what happened on May 30th downtown. Are we going to get, when we have some expectation as to when council members are going to get that document?
Chief Williams, can you unmute yourself and respond to the question? Councilman Mike Polensek, restate the question.
Mr. Chairman, to the chief and command staff, we understand that there's a review going on at present as to what transpired on May 30th downtown. I was one of the council members down there with several of my other colleagues to see firsthand what had transpired. And we understand that there's, again, an internal review, and I'm just wondering when that internal review is going to be complete and when council members will get a copy of that.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, the councilman, we are in that process right now. I can't give you an exact date. There's a lot of information to compile, and then there's an additional review process once we've compiled a draft. So I could say probably in the next 3 to 4 weeks, we'll have something that we can at least get out in draft form to certain people, and then we'll finalize the document, and then we'll put it out.
Okay, that's what I'm asking for through the chair, that all members receive a copy of that as soon as it's available. Mr. Chairman, in addition to the chief, many of us have been getting complaints about police radio, about the new system that's been put into place, how long it takes once you call, all the questions that are being asked. And I'm not going to belabor the point now, but as we move toward the next safety committee hearing, I need some explanation, because I could see the difference when I've called in. The only thing they don't ask me for is my social security number. It is more lengthy, more questions being asked, and we're hearing that a lot of residents are just dropping off the phone. They're dropping off. They're hanging up. And I've heard numbers somewhere around 13,000 drop calls. I don't even know if that's correct. When I heard that, I couldn't believe what I was hearing. 13,000 drop calls from people who called in the police radio. Is that correct?
Mr. Chair, the council.
Chief
Can you hear
Williams?
me?
Yes.
Yeah, through the chair and councilman, I can get you the exact number. There are some calls dropping off. What we've been trying to put out there for folks to know, just like with our old system, as you're giving information, that information is being forwarded to a dispatcher who's actually getting it out to a police officer. So it may take a lot longer, but the process still remains where that information that you're actually giving is being fed simultaneously to a dispatcher so they can start actually dispatching that call. So people just need to be patient, give the information, knowing that things are still in motion. It doesn't wait until we get all that information, say for your social security number, councilman, until we actually give that call out.
Okay. And then finally, Mr. Chairman, again, I'll work with through the chair, and maybe in the future we have a specific meeting, because I can just say this. I've received more phone calls so far this summer and more emails so far than I ever have on quality of life issues. And it concerns me greatly, because you've heard Councilman Jones, both of the, and Bashir Jones, Councilman Jones, all of my colleagues, Councilman Casey, I think I could speak on behalf of everyone. People are calling us more than ever before with concerns and great concerns about what's happening in their neighborhoods. And we've got to make sure there's adequate response, there's adequate enforcement of the laws that are on the books right now, because it's all about people talking with their feet at the end of the day. I want my residents to be assured that they're going to be responded to as quickly as possible. I don't expect the police to be there in 5 seconds, but what I'm hearing from my residents concerns me greatly, especially what has been transpiring in the last several weeks with fireworks. No response, no response, no response. That's not acceptable. That's not good service. So I want to make sure that we're all working together on the same team here to provide the best service we can to our citizens. And I want to work through the chair, as Councilman Zone knows this firsthand, having grown up in a family of 2 council members, what service is all about. That's what we're here for, to provide service. So I'll leave it at that, and I look forward to working with the chair and the command staff to see what we can do to address those growing concerns that we have. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman Polensek. I want to remind my colleagues, we had scheduled on April 23rd of this year, which was canceled due to the pandemic. We were going to get a tour of the communications dispatch center at the 3rd District Police Station. And so I think maybe it would be appropriate in the near future, Chief Williams, if we convene a virtual meeting, maybe in the month of August, where we can talk about what's happening with communications, and my staff will follow up with your team and arrange that.
Yeah,
right.
Mr. Chair.
Chief, please go ahead.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, if I could real quick, yes, we can arrange that hopefully once we get through this COVID and we can do it safely. We've already started additional communications with the safety director on that consolidation of CCS that's been talked about, I'd say probably for the last 6 or 7 years. I think if we can get to the point where we can consolidate those operations, I think things will go a lot better. And then we can reallocate some folks out to street duty. But the councilman's point about calls for service as they relate to quality of life issues, we know that we've had an uptick in calls, especially quality of life calls, because people have been home for the most part. You know, we've had more people at home for longer periods of time, and you know how we sometimes get on each other's nerves, you know, neighbor to neighbor and things like that. But I think the real conversation has to be, you know, a lot of people are talking about defunding the police. A lot of people are talking about how we reallocate funds, but we really need to look at those calls that we actually respond to. And should there be a different response? Should police officers always respond to a barking dog call? Or should we always respond to a loud music call? I remember when I was a district commander back in the day, we actually had the pamphlets that we printed out from the city that had some of the nuisance items on it and who to call. And it wasn't always to call police radio. It was to call Public Works or to call your councilman's office, or to call the kennels, or, you know, folks like that could intervene and take care of some of those quality of life things without involving a 2-man police car, you know, at, you know, almost $1,000 an hour, so to speak. So I think those are some of the conversations going forward that we need to have. And, you know, I'm definitely not a fan of defunding. I definitely am a fan of reallocating some of the responsibilities so we can respond to things that are proper for policing in the 21st century. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman Polensek. I will entertain brief responses from, I have 2 colleagues who have hands up, and I'm gonna call on you respectfully. Just give me a minute. I will say to our partners at the Cleveland Peacemakers Alliance, you can drop off the call now. We appreciate you. We're doing some house cleaning stuff, so you can disengage from this conversation. Director Stevenson, stay on the call if you would.
Thank you.
Chief, the comments that you raised specifically about the pamphlet, that was exactly what, you know, our brief conversation you and I had yesterday in the parking lot. We need to help and assist the police on how we can shift some of the mundane stuff. We depend, you know, people have relied, and I've said this phrase before, we use the police as a crutch. We lean on them all the time. We ask them to solve all of our problems. And quite frankly, it's unfair. We shouldn't be doing that. And now as we go into this national pandemic, and now with Governor DeWine issuing all red counties must wear mandatory masks. Well, you know, now there's going to be looking at law enforcement to enforce this policy, and it's unfair on our police. It puts the police in an awkward situation. So how can we do it in a way that makes it fair? And how can we shift some of this mundane activity that the police really shouldn't be doing? And I think that gets to the heart of the whole defund police movement. Nobody wants to get rid of police. No society. We need law enforcement. We need a lawful society. But how can we shift some of the stuff that really the police shouldn't be involved in that can really create community confidence moving forward? And that's something that this council wants to do. We want to work with you, Chief, and see what we can do to help support your efforts and make sure you have the resources you need in the work you're doing. It's 12:16. I'm going to adjourn this meeting at 12:30 because I have another meeting starting at 12:30. So I will entertain final comments. I have Councilman Joe Jones and Councilman Bashir Jones.
Mr. Chairman, very briefly, I concur with the chief as it relates to putting the pamphlet together. I don't think that we need to keep talking about it. I think we need to get to the business of doing it. Life quality kind of issues and who do people need to call is really needed in our neighborhoods. So on that perspective, I'm in full support of what the chief is talking about. When it talks about the defunding of police, I think that was ill conceived. I think that at the end of the day, what we've been talking about at the city council is, and I haven't gotten this information, so this is a part of the house plan. The way you make your police department a department that is truly reliable into the neighborhood, you have to create zone cars that stay in those neighborhoods. And if we had 3 to 4 zone cars in each of our wards, we can begin the process to develop relationships with the police. People are familiar with the police who are police in their neighborhoods. And then number 2, we've been talking about this now for 20 some years. We have less than 20% of our police force of Black men and women. So, but when we look at our population, it's almost close to 58%, 59% African American. We need to have more diversity in our police department. We don't have that. We've been talking about it for 20 years, but it seemed like it's went on deaf ears, and we're not pulling those people in. That's an issue. I think we need to look at that. And then second, if we would go back to what is really important, and I know some people might, may be upset about what I'm about to say, but I believe we need to have another 100 to 200 police down on the ground. Now, that's just my perspective and what I believe that we need to have to keep our community safe. Our community is not safe, and if someone wanted to interview me on the issue, and I didn't want to interview with them, so if they're listening to this, they'll hear it now. We need more police on the ground. That's how we keep our community safe, and we need diversity within our safety forces. That's how we keep an attachment and people who are familiar with their own people can police them better. And so that's the problem that we're having right now. We're having a lot of younger officers coming in. They don't know the community. They don't know the people in the community. They can't relate. And then you have all these problems and issues behind all of this. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I do press upon the administration to get more African-American male and females into the police department. And then lastly, Mr. Chairman, I want to ask that you hold a meeting to talk about some kind of new plan, because what we're doing right now to keep our neighborhood safe is not working. So I would hope that the chief and the administration, I don't know if you guys you collect all the data, all the information, you have it live just like that. We need to have some kind of plan that we can convey to our citizens how we're going to keep them safe, because they're calling me left and right. They're concerned about a number of issues. And, of course, because of the COVID virus, more people are at home. And so they're seeing a whole lot of stuff. And so they're inundating our offices. And the number one question that they're saying is that, we're paying for a service, a police service to protect and service, and we're not getting it. How do we get the police? How do we even see police driving up and down the streets? Now, before I say that, I want to say this, that the chief and I believe Commander Cookson has done a great job. I see more police in my neighborhood now, but what I'm sharing with you is what the citizens are calling in our offices and saying. So I do see an uptick in police. I'm appreciative of that. Want to see more, and I know that you have a lot of major issues throughout the city of Cleveland. That's the reason why I'm an advocate for more police officers being deployed on the city of Cleveland. And I'm an advocate for more African-American women and men being deployed in our city streets. And to be under the 20%, and then at the ending of this, I asked and requested for how many Black men and women are actually on the police force. I haven't gotten that information. I don't know if you emailed it to me. I know that the chairman of the last committee said that he had gotten the information. I don't see it on any of my emails. So I don't know if you sent it to me or if you sent it to my assistant. I would like to see that. I want to review that information. And then third, we're opening up a new school at John F. Kennedy. And I want to begin the process to work with the chief and his staff that's working on minority recruitment to work with our new school so that our new school can be a feeding formula into the police department, into the fire department, into the EMS department. And I want to see how we can begin to do that, as well as establish a relationship with the program we started that Warrensville now has taken. And they're working it out big time. I mean, they're killing it in their program. And they took that from the city of Cleveland, developed a relationship with Tri-City Community College that we had, and now it's working for them. So I want to try to see how we can do that and develop that bridge, Mr. Chairman. And I would need your leadership, Mr. Chairman, to be able to make that happen, because at the end of the day, if we don't do these basic things, we'll be 20-some years later down the road with a new chief, a new administrative staff, with the same issues all over again. So instead of us just keep going through the same headaches, let us start, setting the foundation for change. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
No, thank you, Councilman. I appreciate your comments. I will tell you that this pandemic has created real challenges for our police department. And I know that the chief is dying to implement his CPOP plan, which is the community policing plan. Councilman, get that feedback. I have to mute you. He's dying to implement that plan to its fullest extent. Aspects of that are being implemented now. And so we will be setting a hearing in the next month or two around what we're doing along that front. I appreciate everyone's for participating in today's committee meeting. This committee meeting stands adjourned until the call of the chair. Thank you all. Be safe, and appreciate all of you. Take care.